Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify it. And I don't know about you guys, but this time of year always feels kind of the same fizzy, electric, restart energy that I get at the beginning of the year. And maybe it's because, here in America, all of our kids are starting to go back to school. It's like, I'm going to do this school year differently. It has that sense of renewal and refresh and starting over again energy. And that's, I think, part and parcel of why I've chosen the theme for the entire month of August to be about discernment, making good decisions, good choices for your work and for your life. And that's where we're going to go today. How to make bold decisions that not only, kickstart you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but take you way out of your comfort zone so that you can make big ripples and positive impact, not only in your career, but in your work and in your life in general. So my special guest today, her name is Josefine Wanner, and she is a former corporate executive turned entrepreneur and business growth strategist. After almost 20 years as a financial services consultant and global program manager, she had a heartbreaking wake-up call that gave her the courage to take the risk and start to pursue her own dreams. Now, she helps other, as she calls them, corporate escapees do the same. So, I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Josefine Wanner. Hey, Josefine.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And is it true for you? I mean, granted, I lived in England for a good number of years, and August is times for holidays and vacations. But there is something about like when the school year starts again of like, I want to do it different this time. Is that the same for you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I also think, before that all starts, people kind of slow down to speed up.
Yes.
And now it's the speed up time. So everyone is probably getting ready, taking time to actually think and probably start thinking about what am I going to do differently now?
Yes, totally. And, I think that's such a brilliant way to put it, because I think a lot of times life is just going. And we just get caught up in the hamster wheel of it all. We don't take that time to actually jump off and assess and am I actually going where I want to go, or am I just going for the sake of going, right?
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
So why do you think then, and this is a generalization, obviously, but, and correct me if you think it differently, but why do you think women sometimes stumble on making bold decisions, whether it's in their career or otherwise? And how do we stop that?
I think it actually starts a very young age, and we put ourselves last. Mm-hmm. And then when we come up a little bit, into our little bit older, we might get kids, and we ourselves just drop down on the priority list year by year by year. And then when we've been there, I did that for 20 years myself, and you kind of like forget. You forget how it was to have fun, to do things just for you, right? So the things that we then thought was fun was to take the kids to the zoo. That's not how you prioritize yourself. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a big piece of the puzzle, actually.
Yes. So, bringing more play into our lives, that was definitely a topic we covered earlier this summer. And yeah, when it becomes you're doing it for someone else, you're still not the number one priority. That's tough. And it's hard. You kind of sit into that space of like, ugh, I've done it again, haven't I? How do you break out of the shame cycle of it?
I first think you need to become aware that that is actually what is happening. Mm-hmm. That you have to invest in yourself, time, but also money. And not all the money always goes to the family or whatever expenses you might have, but some of the money actually goes to you. Mm-hmm. One of the best things I did myself was actually to invest in a writer's course. I had never done anything like that. I had never been away for a longer period of time. This was a prolonged weekend, right? Mm-hmm. To invest in yourself and invest money and time in yourself to start kind of digging into that pot that you have that you actually need to dig in.
And so with the writing course, what did that do? What did that unlock, or did it spark your inspiration?
Yeah, that was like the big kickoff. Because first of all, I had been in the financial services for almost 20 years. So that was my circle of people, a very kind of like high-paced industry, very career-driven, very kind of like elbows out all the time. And so I did this writer's course where I met all these different types of people. There were an actress there, and there were kind of like older men, like coming into their retirement, so that you had all of these specters of people, and you realize, or I realized then, that we all have the same fears, the same fear of, being visible, of doing something that we are not used to doing. None of us had written a book. We didn't know how to do it. And the last day we got an exercise or an assignment where we had to write down kind of like a short story, and we had to read it out loud in front of everyone else there. And there was this man. He was like a public speaker, used to being on the stage, and he kind of like his voice were kind of like trembling when he was reading, because he was so nervous, because this was an unknown area for him. He had never been there before. He had never done that. And that was also something that showed me that when we rehearse things, when we do things over and over and over again, we become more and more confident. So that is also another piece of the puzzle, actually.
Yeah, and I also wonder, just as you were saying that, the things that keep me from making bold decisions in my life is 100% fear, right? It's like, I don't know, will this work? Will this, be accepted? Will it be rejected? Will this make me look like a fool? Will this be wildly successful? And gosh, I'll have to deal with the outcome of that as well. Can you talk into more of those kinds of swirling thoughts?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I have something, and I think I'm not the only one who refers to this like that, but it's the golden cage. We are all stuck in our golden cage.
Yeah.
And the bars in this golden cage, there are what the society thinks, what we think ourselves, what our parents think, our partners or spouses think. And we have the monthly salary. If we talk about like starting our own business or whatever it might be, we have all of these bars that hold us back within the cage. And we need to be able to kind of open the door to face our fears, so that we are able to take these bold decisions. And what you said, the fear of success, that is so real. That is so true. Because once we have experienced a little bit of success, then we're like, holy cow, can this continue? What if this continues?
Yeah.
How will I be able to face this?
Yeah. That makes me think of the Liz Gilbert TED Talk, the second one that she did, where she was like, I've written this incredible book, Eat, Pray, Love, and how in the world am I going to ever top that? Like, that's it. Have I peaked? And she was talking about her creative process of going through being a writer, and like how she had to really just bring herself back to the table every time to just do the craft. And of course, spoiler alert, she comes up with Big Magic, which is an incredible book, and City of Girls, which is an incredible novel. So of course she's seen huge success after that. But I think our teeny tiny little ego brains go, it will never be sustainable, or it'll never get better than this. Or, now you've done this, it's like, you fall down that trap of negative self-talk, right?
Yeah, definitely. And also maybe if you're working with kind of clients, you might also think, so I spend this much time with this number of clients. How in the heck should I be able to manage if I double that number of clients?
Yeah.
I don't double my time. So these are all thoughts that also subconsciously hold us back, and we don't really realize it ourselves.
Right. And so then what happens? Let's play that out. Go, oof, too scary. Then we just replicate the same decisions over and over again, or we fill our schedule. I'll be the first to admit this. I have done this many times in the past. You fill your schedule so busy that you're like, well, I'm just so busy. I can't go after this new initiative. I can't go after this new thing. And days turn into weeks, which turn into months, which turn into years. And then all of a sudden you're in a corporate job for 20 years, right? And you wake up one day. So what was that wake-up call that you had?
Well, if we kind of go back a couple of years first, I had started to think about entrepreneurship. I even, together with two friends, we got stuck in this whole SWOT analysis and analysis paralysis, and we didn't even dare to ask people whether they would be interested in our offer. And there were 3 of us. And one day I was on a high, and another day someone else was on a high. But we didn't really support each other in this whole process.
Yeah.
And 2 of us had like very high paying, high status corporate jobs. So taking the leap to do something else was extremely high, seemed extremely high to us. And I started, at the time I was 45, I started to think about my retirement. Until one day in August 2019, and we learned that my father had incurable cancer. And my Google research said he would have 3 more months to live. And that was my very real and very scary wake-up call. Because I was like, that could have been me. It could have been any one of us. So 4 weeks after that, I handed in my resignation. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I just knew I had to get out of that bubble. I had to do something else. And my father, he didn't get those 3 months. What he got was 6 weeks.
Wow.
It can go so fast. And I didn't want to be in that situation where I would regret not daring to take the steps.
Yeah. And so I'm so sorry to hear about your father, and I'm assuming he's passed now. And so by taking the leap and going, you know what, I have this dream, I have this vision, I want to build this business. What was the journey like for you there? Because, a lot of times businesses, it takes a little time to get them up and going, and get those clients and start making money, anywhere near what your corporate job was paying you. What was that journey like for you then?
Well, first, since I just, handed in my resignation, I didn't even know what to do or how to do next. And my LinkedIn profile, for example, was I didn't have a profile picture. I only accepted invites from people I really knew. Yeah. My Instagram profile was very private too. I had 2 pictures, one of my kids and one of when I crashed our car. That was it from 2013. Wow. So I knew that if I want to make this happen, I have to become a public person. How do I do that? To me, the solution to build my confidence is to take courses or join programs. Because doing the things, learning the new skills gives me the confidence to start doing it. And then also to be with people who are going through the exact same process, facing the exact same fears. That just inspires me. Or when you also see their wins, right? Mm-hmm. Same with coaching. I was like, I want to help women. I don't want anyone to kind of feel the same way I feel now. But what if they say, hell yes, Josephine, we're doing this. Mm-hmm. Am I then liable? So again, I filled my backpack with skills that I needed, tools that I needed.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to go into that much, much deeper in a bit. So I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it in later. So when you coach your clients, the ones that are looking to get out of the corporate bubble, start their own business, it brings us back to like making bold decisions. And, just a side note, even if you're not interested in starting a business, but you want to make bold decisions, I have a feeling these things are going to translate to there as well. But how do you begin to clarify and identify your core values? Because that's something that you do with your clients, right? So walk us through that process.
I think, first of all, it's very, you can do all of these tests online, right? Mm-hmm. They're and you get kind of 50 different values and whatnot. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really help, I think, because it's better if you just focus on 5 areas, actually, in my view.
Okay.
Yeah, in my view. Number 1, status. And status doesn't mean that you have to be the CEO of a company, but it means how proud are you of your job, but also your status within a team or within your family or whatever. How proud are you of your status? Do you feel comfortable with your current job? Mm-hmm. The C stands for certainty. And if that is something that bothers you I have to have my monthly income. I have to know exactly what I get every month. I have to know what happens in 3 months. I have to know what happens in 12 months. If that is really important to you, then maybe starting a business is not something for you. But if that has lower priority to you, then try it, right? The A is autonomy. Some people like to be able to say what they can do. Other people don't have to have that type of autonomy. Mm-hmm. They rather want to be told what to do.
Yeah, and clock in and clock out.
Exactly. And R stands for relatedness. Is it important for you to be around other people? And also to kind of like be aligned with the corporate values that the company that you're working for has? To me, the relatedness and the autonomy were things that were really important to me. I am also not kind of like that I have to know exactly what happens in 12 months' time. It's rather the opposite. So those were not so kind of important to me. And then the last one is fairness. Fairness. How fair or how important is fairness to you? And that can be tiny things that are really important.
And so when you look at those 5 things, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, I guess I'm looking at it on a spectrum of 0 to 10 for each, 10 being the most important. And then that starts to clarify what your core values are. Like what's the next step after that? Putting pen to paper?
Yeah, and I would also actually think, okay, so in what situation did I feel that my status was lowered? And how do I want it to be? Like a simple example, I had started a new position as a senior manager in a role, and we had a senior management meeting. And I came into that meeting, and the chair of that meeting, he opened the meeting and asked a question, and no one replied. So I started speaking, and then he looked at me and said, "Josephine, I wasn't talking to you." Exactly. What did he do? He lowered my status completely in front of everyone else. So to go back, okay, so in what situations did I experience where this kind of where I felt hurt or this didn't resonate with me, and how do I want to feel instead?
Yes.
To kind of really go into those situations step by step. And then look at how do I want to experience it instead.
And then I think, what the hard part is once you've identified your core values and you go, this is what's most important to me. This is how I live my life. This is how, like, the book by which I make decisions from. Then you got to stick to it, right? Because then you're like, oh, crap, my career or the way I spend my time is not aligned with that. And that's sometimes really hard to look that in the mirror. What would you say to that person?
I would say, well, first of all, you can never force anyone out of their cage.
Yeah.
They have to step out of their cage themselves. They have to be ready. And you know that too. When you coach clients and they are not ready, doesn't matter how much you lure them or how you can ask them the best questions, they just won't step out of the cage, I often think that sometimes we do need this wake-up call to actually make a big change. And that can be that someone passes away that's very close to you, that you have a burnout, that you lose your job, that you become ill yourself. And then we start realizing, okay, so what it is that's important to me, and the fear of not achieving that is actually bigger than the fear of, staying in the same environment the whole time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To kind of to put those against each other.
Yeah. And, you think about just the history of time and the world, humans, a human life existence of 80 to 100 years, sometimes less, sometimes more, is such a blip in time, right? It's so fast. I'm 44 right now, and I feel like the life has gone by so fast, like in a blink, right? That it is shocking sometimes to think about how much time I've actually wasted somewhere along the way, where it's like I was too afraid to leap, too afraid to make that bold ask out into the world. And I think for me, certainly since the beginning of this year, I have been really leaning into my own courage and making those bold asks and making those bold decisions. How about you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. And what I've also noticed is I invest in myself all the time now. And I think that is probably the biggest change compared to where I was before, to actually also dare to take the next leap and make the bold decisions. And maybe that is, if you need the support from someone to actually take the next decision, you need to involve them in the process. You can't just say, oh, I'm taking this decision, and you actually need their approval somehow, but you haven't involved them in the process. how do you expect them to reply, right? They haven't been involved in the process. A simple example. My mom, of course, she's not involved in my decision process any longer, but I didn't tell her that I had quit my job until weeks later. And if I would have needed her kind of like approval, I would have had to involve her before to tell her about how I felt about work. Yes, she knew I worked a lot. Maybe she knew a little bit of how I felt, but I hadn't really told her the whole story about what was going on in that corporate role that I had. So if you need someone's approval, you need to involve them.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, how do you get buy-in from like family and key people in your life? Like, you're like, okay, I'm going to become a scuba dive instructor, or I'm going to now make jewelry, or I'm now going to, let's say the flip side, I'm going to stop doing my small business and I'm going to go get a corporate job where I'm going to be traveling a lot and all the things. Like, how do you get that buy-in from your key people in your life when you're making a bold decision like that professionally?
I think you have to be, if you really, 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 really need the buy-in from them, you have to be really open and you have to be really honest about why you want to do this, right? And you have to trust your guts. You have to trust your intuition, because the only time I have made bad decisions have been when I didn't listen to my gut. But then also don't ask people for advice if they are not qualified.
Yes. Oh, man. Everybody's got an opinion, don't they? Woo!
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, gosh, we could talk about that one for days. Or at least maybe I have a lot of people who have lots of opinions that share theirs with me. And I'm like, I don't know if I asked that personally.
Yeah, a client of mine, she's still in a corporate job. So she reduced the number of hours in her corporate job to start investing in her business instead. But the neighbors only heard about the numbers of hours she reduced in her corporate job. And they told her that was the best and the best decision you could have made. And I was like, that's none of their business, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, and also to clarify, like, I think when lovely friends, people who love you, people who want to see you succeed, sometimes they only see 1% of the story, right? They see what you post on social media, or they only see a very small sliver that you've told them, and then making a quick judgment or trying to give some sort of helpful advice in response. Only you know the full pie chart of what's going on, right? To your point, like your intuition, you know 100% of the details, whereas your friends and even your spouse or your kids or, those other key people in your life only still know a sliver. You know the whole thing, right?
Yeah. And even when I say, well, you have to be really honest and truthful about it, but sometimes we might not even dare to be that. Maybe not even to ourselves,
Yeah.
To be honest to ourselves and true to ourselves.
So let's circle back to what we talked about at the top of the conversation about self-confidence. You had said that doing courses and reading books and all those things really empower you and help you build your confidence. But are there other ways that building self-confidence and how the role of that and how that makes you a better, a more bolder decision maker? So how do we do that?
I think we need to have role models to actually do that, to see others that have done it before us.
Yeah.
And to realize that if they have done it, I can do it. And I think there are more than enough role models to learn from. And just maybe listen to podcasts like yours to hear, invest time in that, listen to that podcast and learn so much. You learn about kind of like really concrete things that you can do. We hear you talking, we learn about your story and all the fantastic guests that you have on, right? So invest time in that, and don't be afraid of investing time in yourself, because if you just sit in your kind of like by yourself and you have all of these thoughts going around in your head, it's not going to take you anywhere.
And what I hear in that is, because I can only relate it to my own life, like when I start to get into that negative self-talk kind of swirl, if I isolate, I'm only hearing my voice, over and over and over again. But, getting out and expanding your network by having a role model or a coach or somebody that you know, who's been in your shoes maybe 5 years ahead of you in the journey helps you expand what you see as possible, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I think when you can expand what you believe is possible in your professional life or even in your personal life, then you go, oh, I didn't know that was possible. And then you start to make those bold asks. You start to make those bold decisions, right? Because you're like, oh, well, this is possible. I can do this, right? This feels, you know, like something that's within my reach. Can you speak into that a bit more?
Yeah, and actually also to come back to the question you asked before. So how has the journey been for me since I left my corporate job to becoming an entrepreneur? Well, you know, when I quit my job and I started these different trainings, I was like, okay, so what trainings can I add to my to my backpack that I can still use even in a future corporate leadership role? So I hadn't stopped thinking about that. I was still in that in that mode. But I really think you have to let go. You have to choose. You really have to choose. Otherwise, you're confusing yourself and you're confusing the universe. Mm-hmm. And then to really, as you say, have a role model, invest in yourself, invest in a coach who has done it before you, who has gone the path before you. And there are more than sufficient people to choose from. Mm-hmm. And to pick one that really resonates with you and to start implementing their strategies, because their strategies work. Mm-hmm. If they have worked for them, they work for everyone else. But it has to feel authentic, and you have to make them to yours.
Mm-hmm. And so what I hear in all of this is, you know, if you've got a big decision that you're trying to make, let's say you are like, I'm going to take the leap away from this very squishy, comfortable corporate job that has a big paycheck, but I'm, you know, it's soul sucking and I'm losing myself every single day. To making the leap to something else, like you have to be able to first acknowledge that there's something wrong, right? To identify your core values, like what's important to you and where you want to go. 3, find a role model, empower yourself with education, courses, a new community of people that are similar and like-minded to you. But then what about the leap? Because I think there's a lot of times where, you know, many of us are just standing there proverbially looking over the edge of the cliff going, that's big and scary. I don't know. Like, I think we could all get to that point, but the actual leap of making the decision itself, talk us through that.
But I don't think it is a leap. I think it is like very many small steps. And when you have to take them one by one. And one very first step can be to just send an email, send a DM to someone. I don't know, create an Instagram business account, whatever, depending on where you are in your process, booking a consult with that coach that you wanted to, maybe wanted to work with. Start with small steps, because when we start thinking about leaps, when we start thinking about it, I used to talk like it's a big mountain and you see yourself at the top, but this big mountain, it's so big. It's so big in front of you. How will you ever get up on the top of that mountain? Well, step by step. You have to take one step after the other. It's important to have that goal, that big, hairy, scary goal, but don't think that you have to accomplish that within a month or 6 months or 1 year. But start taking steps, because if you don't take steps, you won't get anywhere. And the steps don't have to be big. They can be small.
So it's a reframe, you know, really, instead of looking at whatever thing you're trying to accomplish as a big giant cliff that you're jumping off and leaping off, it's more of a staircase of one step at a time that takes you from there to there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my entrepreneur friends, she said, well, she thought it was a leap. She thought it was kind of like jumping off a cliff. And it turns out it was just as if she would have jumped off a sidewalk.
Yeah.
When she then eventually did it, it was not higher than that.
And, you know, it makes me think also when you reached out to our team, I think it was an email, you know, and all of a sudden months later, here you are on the podcast. So, you know, you're living proof that when you make a bold decision and a bold ask and the timing just happens to be right, it works, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I listened to your podcast and I was like, this is so fantastic. And I was like, I would love to be on it. And as you say, I sent an email and you replied fairly quick, or quite very quickly. I was like, oh my God, this is happening. So definitely dare to do the things that, and I also think, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst thing is that you didn't reply or that you would say no. You wouldn't kill me, right? It wouldn't kill me to just send that email.
Right. Right. Well, and yeah, I think that's it. Like we get a ton of pitches all the time from people and we love getting them because, it reminds us that, wow, there are people out there that are listening all around the world, which is an amazing feeling as a content creator to know that, what we're doing is bringing great value. But sometimes it's just divine timing, and I think that the reminder, not only for yourself, but for me and for anyone that's listening, because I pitch people all the time, is that you just can't take it personally if you hear nothing or you hear a no. You just have to keep making those bold asks, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and continue building your network and think in terms of connections and what can I do for them? Because then it also makes it easier to make bold decisions when you have, first of all, as you said, when you are surrounded with people who think alike, and if you have these kind of more toxic or not so supporting people, I'm so sorry, but you have to cut. You have to cut with them. You have to leave that surroundings. Because that's not doing you any good.
Because that's that limited mindset that's like saying, no, you play in this teeny tiny little petri dish here. And what we're trying to do is break out of that to expand what is possible and expand the container of what's possible as well. And to change gears a little, and I think this goes into what we're talking about. You also share with your clients 4 core steps that you need to implement in order to actually show up for yourself. And showing up for yourself is such a necessary part of making bold decisions. So walk us through what those 4 core steps are.
The very, very first step that I think you need to do is you have to realize, you have to commit to yourself that you are important. Because if you don't think that you are important, that is going to show to everyone else too, be it your family or be it your surroundings or whoever. You need to realize that you are important. And the second thing is you need to block me time in your agenda. It can be, 4 hours once a month or one day once a month or whatever it might be. And then you do things that only you want to do, has nothing to do with the kids or with the spouse or with the friends or anything, unless it is something that you really, really want to do together with the friends or with the family. But it has to be something you want to do.
Yes. And I've put this into practice in the last couple of years. And I tell you, it really does work. My whole life lives and dies by my Google Calendar. But when I started blocking time in for working out or going to yoga or, meditation or otherwise, those are just me time. And no client calls ever can get, swapped into those spaces because my scheduler link knows this is non-negotiable. My children know it's non-negotiable. And this is me filling my cup so that I can show up and be a better person for them too. It's so critically important that you do that.
Absolutely. And when you speak about your business, it is also very important to block in emergency time in your calendar weekly. I never take any clients on Fridays because Fridays is my time to do strategy decisions and also to have that emergency block in case something pops up that I really need to attend to. That is really important to block that off too.
Yeah, that's really good. An emergency time is like an hour or a half day or a full day, or how? Give us a little bit more details there. Recurring emergency time.
I block it every Friday, actually. I have the whole Friday blocked off. But then when I do my me time, like my recuperation time, I do that on Fridays.
Yeah.
So let's say it's 1 Friday per month that I have my me time, and then 3 Fridays per month that I have these emergency blocks.
And that's to put fires out, or to tell us more what you mean by emergency time.
For me, it's also to catch up. to catch up, because when you start the week, or when I start the week, it's often that I think, oh, I want to do this and this and this and that. But then during the week, new things come in that you didn't expect before, right? And still you have all this sometimes to-dos, important to-dos, still on the Friday. So those, then I kind of tick them off on the Friday instead. The emergency time doesn't have to be on a Friday. It can be any day, or it can be, as you say, maybe 1 hour per day, or whatever it might be. But to really stick to that, and not kind of go into that all the time.
Got it. Okay, so again, to recap, commit to yourself being important. And when you share that with not only yourself, you prioritize yourself, you show that as a role model to your kids, to your spouse, to your clients as well. 2, you block out the me time in your agenda or calendar. 3, you add recurring emergency time blocks in. What's number 4?
That is probably the most important one of them all, that you need to be kind to yourself. And I know we've heard this like hundreds of times, that if you would speak to a friend like you speak to yourself, would you still be friends with that one? And I think we hear that, and still we don't really live by that. And I think that is so important too.
It is. And I don't know, sometimes it can get really hard because we're so hypercritical of ourselves. And that negative self-talk can really rear its ugly head. For me, it's when I'm not sleeping very well, when I'm not staying hydrated. I mean, it's like down to base level physical needs. When I'm eating crap and isolating, then that starts to rear its ugly head. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, definitely. And also, when something goes a little bit not as planned, and then you start thinking, oh, I should have done this instead, then it would have been better if I wouldn't have, and you start kind of like this troll in your head talking over and over and over.
Yeah.
So put that troll at the side and don't listen to her. In my case, it's actually the good girl who always wants to kind of over deliver. I then say, well, let's send her on holiday. Let's give her a couple of drinks and she can be, on holiday, and she can come back, because she's also not only bad, she also has positive things that she does. But I don't need to have her all the time.
That's a very good point. And it reminds me of an episode I did earlier this season that was how to deal with disappointment, especially if you've kind of hit a place where you've put something out in the world and somebody said, thank you, but no thank you. If you need a little bit more guidance on how to recover fast from that, there's a link in the show notes at thesimplifierspodcast.com for that one, which might actually become handy. So Josefine, there's so much to this, and I really feel like you've shared a lot of really good tips and advice and things. And just a reminder to you guys, her website is josephinewanner.com. And all of that, again, the links are all in the show notes for you guys to find, and you can connect with her on social media. Is there one place that you hang out the most? Instagram, LinkedIn?
It's actually LinkedIn. I think it's super easy to connect with people on LinkedIn. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me that you are from Mary's podcast so that I know where you're from, and then we can start a discussion.
That's brilliant.
We'd love to do that.
And you've got a workshop coming up in September, the Scale and Thrive Formula Workshop. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually for service-based business owners to kind of implement that scalable offer that they actually need in order to kind of create the hours or kind of reduce the hours, because if you only serve one-to-one, it needs a lot of hours to make the revenue that you need, or you need to have a very high price point. But if you implement a scalable offer instead, it's easier to scale. It will free up so much time that you can invest either in family or in lead generation.
Brilliant.
So it's a really cool workshop.
Excellent. And then you also have the Ultimate Workshop Planner. So it's a template to help plan and execute your next live trainings or workshops. So tell us about that freebie for our audience.
I actually told my business manager that when we created it, it's almost too good to give away for free. And it is amazing because it's a step-by-step guidance. It gives you all the steps, because I'm also a workshop sucker. I love workshops. And there are so many things that can go wrong, but if you have a step-by-step guidance, you know how to do it, then it will become easier and you will start loving workshops as much as I do.
Brilliant. Well, again, all of these links are in the show notes over at thesimplifierspodcast.com. You can find that, download those all for free, which is incredible. So, Josefine, as we wrap up, there's a couple of questions I like to ask you that I ask every single person on the podcast. So here we go. First, what is one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
There is a book that I read a couple of months ago, and it's by Alex Hormozy. Alex Hormozy. And the book is called $100 Million Offers, How to Make Offers So Good People Feel Stupid Saying No. And the book, I think, shows how important it is because it's only $1 to buy on Amazon, actually. So to show how fantastic free offers can be when they are like filled, like valued with so much value in there.
That's very interesting. I've never heard of this book. So I'll link it up in the show notes for if you guys want to check it out. I mean, $1 like that does feel like, it's an easy yes to just download. But maybe that's his secret, right? He gets millions of people to download a $1 book. Very clever.
Exactly. And he has all these links in the book to his other free offers. So it's his sales funnel.
Yeah.
It's his sales funnel. And it's really, really good.
So interesting. So next question, tell us who is one person in your network, somebody that you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things. We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
I think there are so many people who say, I don't have time to do this. And I have an example of a mother. She has 2 kids, and she has not only one business, but she has 2 startups actually. And her youngest daughter she's 2 years old, and she has had a kind of cold for a very long time. And during the COVID period, you couldn't bring her to daycare or anything. So she was at home all the time. Wow. And it's very difficult to build a business then, when you have to focus your energy and your time on something else. And she is pulling through, she's taking action, she's doing all the steps you need to take, and she's always positive. And I think that is a role model to look up to. Her name is Johanna Skog Knudsen. Johanna Skog Knudsen.
And what kind of a business does she run?
That is the interesting part, because she's like an environmental friendly person. So she runs a product-based business with cloth diapers. And then she has she dyes yarn too, and has a service-based business there so that you can buy courses on knitting. So it's a really interesting combination.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we'll link her up in the show notes if you guys are curious about what Johanna's doing in the world. Again, over at the simplifierspodcast.com. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
I am grateful that I am healthy. I had a real scare myself bit over 8 months ago, and a tumor was detected, a malignant tumor, but it was discovered on time. And I'm just grateful that I can pursue what I want to pursue and to give back. So that is what I am grateful for.
And I'm so grateful that you're healthy and you're here with us today as well. So again, Josefine, her website is josephinewanner.com. All the links are in the show notes. And I'm just so grateful for your time and sharing your wisdom with us today. So my final question is this. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and they're thinking, I have been on the precipice of making a very, very bold decision for way too long. And I have stalled and stopped and procrastinated and numbed and done everything else instead of making that decision. What's one thing you could whisper into their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
I would just say, just take a small step. One tiny step, whatever, the smallest they can just imagine, whatever that might be. If they are, in a corporate role and they want to get out of the corporate role, might update their CV or whatever it might be, take the smallest steps, because that is like a domino brick and it's going to start rolling by itself. But you have to take that very first step.
Josefine, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Mary, for having me.